This is a Fox News alert. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is The Five. We begin tonight with breaking news. The New York Times this evening reporting that President Trump suggested to then FBI Director James Comey that he drop the Bureau's investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. According to the Times, in February, Mr. Trump told Comey, quote, "I hope you can let this go," citing a memo written by Mr. Comey. The White House says the report is, quote, "not a truthful or accurate portrayal of the conversation between the president and Mr. Comey." But opponents of the president are saying this new information is stunning evidence of obstruction of justice. It's the second straight night we've had breaking news about the president, and joining us with more on this developing story is chief political anchor Bret Baier. Bret, I noticed that you tweeted early on when this story broke, about 15 minutes later, that Comey was a known note-taker, writing detailed memos. This may be the tip of a very detailed iceberg and could change the dynamic on the Hill. I'd like for you to talk about that, and also we're going to take it around for questions. My question is, the Post, citing anonymous sources, says that Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein had seen this memo before they had written the memo that Trump said originally was the reason for the firing of Jim Comey. So I just wonder if you have been able to track any of that down between 6 and 9 o'clock, which isn't a lot of time.
Well, first of all, good evening. Good to be with you. I think that here's what we know, and it's important in these environments to deal in facts. What we know to be a fact from FBI sources and sources at the Department of Justice is that Comey, the former FBI director, then FBI director at the time, met with President Trump February 14th, the day after Michael Flynn was fired. After that meeting, we know that he took very detailed notes, a very detailed memo, we're told, and that he was uncomfortable. What we don't have, independently of the New York Times, is the quote from the memo, as they report, that President Trump says to Comey, "I hope you can find a way to bring this to an end." In other words, the investigation of Michael Flynn. We also don't know what the extent of the memos and how many memos there are and what exactly is in them. We do know another fact, that the acting FBI director, McCabe, testified on Capitol Hill that there is no known interference from the White House or anyone else in the FBI investigation, that nothing has slowed the FBI agents that are doing the investigation. Also, Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, testified to the same thing. So I think where we are, until we get more confirmation or actually see the memo, is really where Senator Richard Burr is, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, where he said tonight, "I need to see more than just anonymous sources here." He met with Comey the day before he was fired. He and Senator Warner from Virginia, the two chairs of the Senate Intelligence Committee, they said he didn't say anything about this. He didn't tell them one thing, and he got very detailed in what he did tell them. He says, Burr says, you would think he would say something if this was truly what happened. He didn't clearly say much to anyone, as far as we can tell.
All right, and then we know that he's been invited to testify, so maybe then we'll be able to get those answers at least then. We'll take it around the table, starting with Jesse.
Brett, I want to put a little Waters World spin on this story. If I went out tomorrow, I'm not going to do the thing, but okay. You know, that was a nice attempt. You've been practicing, I can tell. If I went out tomorrow to the street and I asked 10 people who James Comey was, I'd probably maybe get 3, maybe 4 who knew, depending on the neighborhood. This is a scandal with no video, with no audio, with no sex, with no money, with no dead bodies. It's a boring scandal. No one knows the deputy AG's name. No one can pronounce the Russian defense minister's name.
I can.
There's memos, and which memo and who sent what memo to who. No one is emotionally invested or can even understand this story. It's a process story. Now, do we think we're losing sight of what the rest of the country thinks and feels about something like this?
Well, listen, I think that you're right in that there's a large section of the country that would like Washington to work on something else, but it is a big story. I mean, potentially, if you have the president asking the FBI director to move away from an investigation where he is told that he's not a target, but yet is investigating the Trump campaign and ties or collusion possibilities with Russia, That's a big deal. And it is a big
President
enough deal.
Obama say publicly the IRS situation wasn't that big of a deal, or that Hillary's Secret Service didn't put any lives at risk or didn't jeopardize national security, and everybody
Jesse,
blew that off.
Jesse, you're exactly right. And Trey Gowdy tonight on Martha's show mentioned that, saying Comey did not come forward the 4 times he said President Obama stepped in front of an investigation, namely the Hillary Clinton email server investigation, by saying essentially it was no big deal. You're right, and there is hypocrisy here. However, right now, in this environment, as these stories come out day by day, there are elements of truth to them. Some of them have fallen apart, but some of them are describing a White House that is in a tough spot and is in a chaotic moment.
Yeah. All right, Bob.
Just Jesse, the 4 people you interviewed probably are from Nigeria, but let me ask. This goes to some facts. The fact is that they had dinner together. The fact is that Comey does keep these memos. He's a lawyer, and he gave him detailed information on them. The fact is somebody in the CIA leaked that out to the Washington Post. The fact is that the White House says no. So that means either Trump or Comey is lying, right?
That is true.
Okay. Now, if that's the case, when Jesse says this is not a big deal, for the President of the United States to be caught in obstruction of justice is clearly an impeachable offense.
If you get to that point, I think, Bob, you're right. You could make that claim. I think that you're going to see many calls now for the actual memo. You've already got a letter that went out tonight from Jason Chaffetz, the House Oversight Committee chairman, to the FBI to say we need to see these memos. You already hearing, Bob, calls for the so-called tapes that the president referenced in that tweet, and the White House has not talked about since, either the tapes themselves or transcripts. And I think you're going to see more and hear more calls for a special prosecutor or a special commission, and that Republicans may start getting to that spot.
A long way to go from here to there. Kimberly.
All right. Good evening, Brett. So also, what about the source saying that there are copious notes? I imagine there's going to be a request, for those notes. But what I'm curious about is if this was a situation that was developing at that time, why didn't Director Comey say anything about it? Why are we hearing about it after he's been dismissed from his position? I mean, it's just a question that I would look at as a former prosecutor to say, what is the motive here? How valid is this information? Why wasn't it contemporaneous, right happening at the time if he thought it was problematic versus waiting in the aftermath for something like this to then get leaked out?
I agree with you, Kimberly. That's a big question. I think the memos, as far as we can tell, and from what sources are telling us, were contemporaneous at the time, dated and marked every time he talked about something with a big figure like the president on big items. However, why didn't he step up? The New York Times reports it was a close circle at the FBI who knew, but there wasn't an obstruction that was testified to by the acting FBI Director McCabe or the Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who wasn't there at the time, but clearly had the information about the DOJ and how the investigation was going.
Just real quick,
that is the question.
Yeah. Okay, just real quick, in terms of when I would proffer evidence in front of a jury for something like this, if you have an electronic recording or something that can be authenticated in terms of its veracity, time, date stamp, that's one thing. But if somebody's writing a note, I can write a note here and I can backdate it for last June and say, well, I made this, and these are a series of my notes that were contemporaneous at the time, and put that forward. But nevertheless, you can't necessarily accept it for the truth of the matter if you can't authenticate the time that it was actually produced.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think his documents were kind of seized or locked down the day he was fired, and we'll have to get into the process of what exactly happened with those memos.
It's just interesting questions,
Right, Gutfeld.
It seems like I see you every day now, Brett. Trump breaks more news than Michael Moore breaks lawn chairs. According to this memo, Trump said, I hope you let him go, or I hope you can let this go. When you say you hope for something, it's not a command. It's not saying you better do this. It's like, I hope I get a bicycle for Christmas, and I really hope you show up to my birthday party, or I really hope that you won't make loud noises, when I'm sleeping. It's a hope. It's not a command. So in my mind, and I know this isn't yet a question, it seems like it's not a big deal, which is maybe why Comey didn't think it was obstructionist, so he didn't have to comply to reporting it, because he knew that that what Trump was doing was what Trump does. Everything to him is like visiting a construction site. It's not what a politician says or does. He doesn't understand how internal stuff works. So when he shows up, it's like, I really wish we could do this for cheaper. I wish we didn't use these kinds of lights in these bathrooms. We could have done a better job. It seems to me that this is just how Trump speaks, and Comey understood that this is how Trump speaks. Therefore, he didn't feel it was required to tell the DOJ of any attempt to obstruct justice. I think I just explained this story better than anybody on the planet.
Maybe you did. Maybe you did. Steve Hilton on our panel was very similar in his thoughts about being, well, all right, but you were much better. But listen, basically the outsider mentality, the developer mentality, and that he hasn't been around Washington to know the speak. However, I don't think it takes away from the import of the series of stories and the White House kind of dealing with all of it at once.
I was trying to take the import out of it.
I know you were.
Yes.
And export
it. I think it was a good try.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Excellent effort.
All right, we're going to keep talking here, but thank you so much, Bret Baier.
We'll see you guys.
Okay. Kimberly, though, do you remember when Comey had the whole thing in 2004 about the reauthorization of the NSA program, and he goes to the bedside of Attorney General John Ashcroft, and he says, I'm uncomfortable with this, and there's Andy Card, the chief of staff, and the White House counsel, and he actually documented those things then. That's one of the reasons that all of those things, and as I understand, it was like a memo to file, like a contemporary utterance, so that he documents all of this stuff, and it could be that he has times when he talked to President Obama too. I mean, I don't know if he'll actually say that, but is it totally inadmissible to have something like that? I thought that actually was good evidence.
No, it absolutely isn't. And so what you would have is an evidentiary hearing to make sure to say, is it admissible? Can we authenticate it? Is this something? And the points you bring up are good, that they would argue to say, look, this is somebody that is in the pattern of practice of authenticating and putting forward these documents. He does these memorandums. You see that there's a series, but then it begs the question, well, if you're going to put forward these documents as it relates to President Trump, then let's see the documents about President Obama and the different times that you decided to, look the other way, even though you had perhaps an idea or a feeling of obstruction of justice. Why now is this coming forward? Who is leaking this information against the president to try to make it seem like there was something that's untoward? We don't know. That's what they have investigations for. But nevertheless, the timing of it seems rather, I don't know what you're laughing about, Bob, but it seems a little bit suspect, because in the wake of Director Comey being fired by the president, then all of a sudden we get this, oh yeah, bad on you, you tried to obstruct justice. So these are questions that need to be asked.
Well, yeah, I grant you they need to be asked, but I mean, to go back to the Obama thing again, I mean, you guys have got to move forward, This is not something you keep going back to.
You got to move forward from the election.
I haven't said anything about the election. I've said I've accepted the fact the guy's president of the United States, barely, but he's president of the United States. But listen, when you said you thought you
well, he was president 5 months ago, so it actually is relevant, because part of this story weaves back into the presidency of Barack Obama.
If you're no, wait a minute. Look, if you're Comey and he did not reveal that fact about the obstruction of justice, and it was a good try, Greg, but you could call it hope, you could call it dirt, you could call it anything else you want. If he said, take it easy on my boy,
I would hope
that's obstruction of justice.
I would hope.
When your boss says that to you?
Yeah, no, that's when you say I would hope. That's not the same. It's just not. If you understand language, it's not.
But it is.
And if it was, then he would have believed it to be obstructionist, and he didn't. This is very Mean Girls, by the way. This whole way that Comey's doing this.
You know what I'm beginning to think about Comey?
How about how he was fired?
No, I thought he was. Oh my God, that's a great example. He was fired.
So it's like payback.
It was an aggressive act that Trump did in the open. Comey did it behind closed doors. He did it in secret. He had a friend read the memo. That's Mean Girls. But Trump actually said, you're fired. You're not even here, and it's public. Yeah, there is a difference.
Let's assume there was a tape of that
That's Bad Boys for Mean Girls.
Greg, let's assume there was a tape. Let's assume there was a tape of that discussion, and that came out.
Yeah.
Then that means President Trump obstructed justice. I don't care how you look at it, he's gone.
Maybe he's trying to have a meeting on a tarmac in Arizona like Bill Clinton. Would you have been worried about
I'll tell you, man,
That's a good point. That's a good difference.
You got anything else?
You know what? I'm beginning to
That's
think
a good point,
you
though.
made a great point. I think Comey is a little bit of a drama queen. He goes to the bedside
Wait, who are you
of
pointing to?
Ashcroft.
Dana,
He makes
Fred.
this huge fight with Apple after San Bernardino. You know, he gets fired, then he starts leaking. He's always interfering with Hillary, and then on the eve of the election, it's always about Comey.
You know,
Have you ever noticed that?
What I've noticed is every law enforcement officer, every FBI officer that has said anything about him says he's a terrific guy.
Well, we heard a lot of people pretty happy he left because he didn't really pull the cork on Hillary.
Right, he's very professional. He's very comprehensive.
Well, he's not acting professional right now.
Jump into this Bill Clinton thing, man. Leave it alone, man.
Having a friend read a memo.
You blame Bush for 8 years.
No, but the bottom line is...
You read the memo.
Yeah, but Comey had no problem when he was assuming the role of Loretta Lynch and stepping in as judge, jury, prosecutor and saying there will be no charges against Hillary Clinton. There is insufficient evidence, and adding an element of the crime that does not exist,
But what does that have to do with
It has
Donald
to do
Trump?
with you're saying that he's the shining example and beacon of purity.
What does it have to
and
do
that
with...
Donald Trump tried to obstruct justice,
That's
which
like,
you don't have proof of.
You know the law well. That's not going to stand up in a court of law. Well, because they jury couldn't differently. The fact is that Trump can obstruct justice. That's wrong.
I'm specifically speaking to your point and making an evaluation about his character and integrity, and I'm pointing to a specific examples where he was lacking in it.
But also, Bob, like it might not have been illegal. It might be politically unwise or painful to go through, but I think that the Democrats to leap to impeach immediately after hearing anonymous sources from the Washington Post, it's a little bit of a stretch.
No, they shouldn't move to impeach now, but let's clarify something. It is not a political issue. When he said, lay off my boy, that's obstruction of justice.
I hope they let it go.
Yeah,
All right.
he did.
We got our